women today have less freedom than their mothers.
But they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body.
You're telling me that abortion is a positive good? What are you saying? Well, you're arguing for child sacrifice.
Every human life, born and unborn, is made in the holy image of Almighty God.
The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk.
In 2023, there is heavy debate on conflicting perspectives on the rights of the pregnant individual, the status of the fetus, and the role of the government in regulating reproductive choices.
As a young woman growing up during this time of such divide, I am more frightened than ever. I slowly watch the right to make choices for my own body be stripped away. I hear stories of girls my age or younger being sexually abused, raped, and pregnant. They didn't have a choice when that happened to them, and because of ignorant men such as Donald Trump and some Supreme Court justices, they have to have their lives completely altered with a child.
As a man, I've observed my peers losing the right to make decisions about their body due to governmental control. In support of my peers, I've attended women's rights protests as a male supporter because that is fundamental for change. There needs to be support across the gender spectrum, as it is essential to make a more inclusive and just society. To gain further insight into the topic of abortion, we sought the professional opinion of Dr. Jain, an OB and infertility specialist, who will share his perspective on these matters.
So as an OB and infertility doctor, what are your views on abortion and how have you seen it change over the years?
Well, as an infertility specialist, I've spent a lot of time working with women who are looking to have a child and really struggling through that process. As an OB, I've also seen women who don't want to continue a pregnancy for varying reasons. I strongly believe that women should have the right to choose how they want to treat their bodies and when they want to begin their family building journey. I strongly believe that women deserve the right to choose, as through force, it takes a huge toll on the soon-to-be mother and on the unwanted child. I've also seen abortion access change dramatically over the years in this country, and I'm afraid it seems like things are at a difficult point right now with women having that right to be able to choose.
Abortion is extremely controversial today, and to understand why it has become so multi-faced, we must travel back to 1928.
In the 1920s, abortion was becoming criminalized, driving the practice underground and resulting in a significant increase in surgical fatalities. Now that we are in 1928, we must explore the life and legacy of William Faulkner.
William Faulkner, an influential American writer, grew up in New Albany, Mississippi, and was born in 1897. Faulkner had a deep fascination with the Southern lifestyle, which he navigates in his novels. One of his most influential novels, As I Lay Dying, was also written in Mississippi and intricately dives into the topic of abortion within a Southern family.
As I Lay Dying is set in Yoknapatawpha County, a fictional county in Mississippi, and primarily takes place in the rural community of Jefferson.
One of the main challenges in the novel centers around the only female child of the Bundren family, Dewey Dell. Dewey Dell is a 17-year-old experimenting with sexual relations. Dewey Dell's name has a very important meaning in terms of sensual language. When putting together Dewey, which alludes to dewy, meaning moist, and Dell, meaning a small, wooded valley, both meanings can equal a virgin valley. The importance of Dewey Dell's specific naming relates to Faulkner's interest in the topic of abortion and his investigation through the lens of a small Southern family.
At first glance at the name Dewey Dell, one may wonder why her parents, Aunt and Addie, chose to name her something so sexualizing. When her parents could have chosen anything else, they landed on a very unique name that was very uncommon at the time. When they named their sons Cash and Jewel, it's clear that they have hopes for financial success in the future, as that was traditionally the man's role. Moreover, Darrow's etymology is darling and presents Aunt's and Addie's strong connection to Darrow. The clear difference between the positive or negative attitudes towards each name represents the oppression that Dewey Dell lives in. As for Dewey Dell, the only daughter, her parents probably had high hopes of her having children and continuing their legacy, though ironic, as when she later becomes pregnant, she fears her father's reaction. This was the female's role at the time. Faulkner, the puppeteer in this symbolism, does this to highlight the restrictive gender roles and societal expectations that Dewey Dell and other women of that time period faced.
Towards the beginning of the novel, Dewey Dell gets into a relationship with a farmhand, Leif. In one of their first sexual interactions, Dewey Dell says, quote, "And we picked on, touching. I didn't say anything. I said, 'What are you doing?' And he said, 'I'm picking into your sack.' I could not help it," end quote, page 27. Here, Dewey Dell admits immediately that she is simply a young girl who was easily influenced, as she didn't say anything, to have sex with Leif. She admits to feeling anxious, as she questioned numerous times what he was doing, but she nevertheless consents to having sex because she, quote, "could not help it." After this, Dewey Dell becomes pregnant. Faulkner showcases how oftentimes women are impregnated without intention, and sometimes without consent. This supports Faulkner's pro-choice mindset, as he acknowledges consent, a topic that was not very popular during his time. He shows the struggles women can face, and how becoming pregnant isn't always a choice, so they should receive a choice in aborting it. As Dr. Jain previously explained, having the opportunity to receive an abortion is extremely important, as, according to him, it can, quote, "take a huge toll on the soon-to-be mother and on the unwanted child," end quote.
Shortly after her sexual relation with Leif, Dewey Dell reflects on her pregnancy. Quote, "I feel like a wet seed in the hot-blind earth," unquote, page 64. Here, Dewey Dell is continuing her interest in having an abortion. Quote, "A wet seed," unquote, symbolizes her embryo, as wet seeds lead to the growth of a plant just like her pregnancy leads to the growth of a child. Dewey Dell also highlights her opinion of her surroundings with, quote, "hot blind earth," unquote. The, quote, "hot earth," unquote, indicates a traditionalist environment that disapproves of premarital sex. As hotness or fire can trap someone in flames, traditionalist environments can trap someone in societal expectations. Specifically, the, quote, "blind earth," unquote, refers to the ignorance and selfishness of her family. Faulkner is highlighting how impregnated women may not want to continue their pregnancy as their child would live in a, quote, "hot blind earth," unquote.
In Dewey Dell's first attempt towards receiving an abortion, she enters a pharmacy in Matson with clerk Mosley. Mosley asks her what she is there for, but as she is nervous, he doesn't get an answer until he asks if she needs medicine. She ultimately mentions that, quote, "it's the female trouble," end quote, page 200. She never specifically states that she is there for an abortion, but for her period, and rather alludes to her pregnancy with comments such as this one. Her fear of asking is understandable and emphasizes the sexist reality in 1928. Mosley then said, quote, "The Lord gave you what you have, even if he did use the devil to do it. You go back to Leif, and you and him take that $10 and get married with it." Page 203. Mosley implies that God is responsible for her pregnancy, even if the devil was involved in the process, meaning that she should continue the pregnancy as it was God's doing. By suggesting that Dewey Dell should use her money to get married to Leif, he shames her premarital pregnancy. Mosley's words exemplify the societal attitudes that place a heavy burden of shame on women who consider abortion, as abortion was regarded as a taboo topic and heavily criticized. Faulkner's writing further proves him to be pro choice, as he sheds light on the oppressive societal attitudes and challenges faced by women in the context of abortion.
Later in the novel, Dewey Dell goes to a bigger drugstore in Jefferson and asks the supposed doctor, McGowan, to give her something to abort her pregnancy for $10. While there, he says, quote, "She looks at me. She don't even blink. What do you want then?" Unquote. Quote, "I got to do something," she says. "Give me the medicine first," unquote. Page 246. McGowan understands Dewey Dell's desperation for an abortion and utilizes it to his advantage. Thus, he then proposes an idea to rid the pregnancy with, quote, "It won't hurt you. You've had the same operation before. Ever hear about the hair of the dog?" Unquote. Page 247. Here, McGowan is proposing to have sex with her as it will supposedly rid her of her pregnancy. In 1928, abortions were primarily performed by women who had passed generational recipes, practices, and herbs. Despite McGowan not knowing how to perform an abortion by any means, as he was not introduced with any medical background, he uses the desperation of Dewey Dell to propel his desire for a sexual relation. Through McGowan's manipulative actions, Faulkner highlights the exploitation of vulnerable women by those seeking personal gain. This exploration of abortion showcases Faulkner's critique of a society that denies women control over their own bodies.
Ultimately, Ant takes her abortion money to buy his teeth, leaving Dewey Dell with nothing. She ends utterly alone, without any support from her loved ones, as she navigates what to do with her pregnancy. With this ending, Faulkner implies the harsh reality and societal abandonment and lack of support that women like Dewey Dell faced in navigating their reproductive choices. William Faulkner's portrayal of abortion in As I Lay Dying serves as a reminder of the importance of the right to safe and legal abortions. Through the character of Dewey Dell, Faulkner illuminates the struggles faced by women in a society that imposes restrictions on their reproductive choices. By delving into Dewey Dell's desperation, vulnerability, and exploitation, Faulkner highlights the need to allow women control over their own bodies and the consequences that arise from denying them control over their bodies. Just as McGowan wants control over Dewey Dell and what she does with her body and their sex, anti-abortionists also want to control other people's bodies, making them fundamentally similar. Faulkner would say that such folks today are in effect raping women as they are forcing a woman into something against her own will. His narrative confronts the outdated attitudes of the 1920s to 30s and challenges readers to rethink the constraints placed on women's reproductive rights, ultimately advocating for a more compassionate and understanding approach to women's experiences.
Faulkner's progressive attitude, which was ahead of his time, calls for an empathetic and inclusive societal comprehension of the complexities surrounding abortion while highlighting the importance of allowing women the freedom to make decisions about their own bodies.